Well, I'm trying to build the ultimate protocol, and signing up could look really easy. Basically, signing up can be just one button that is a consent button, and that is to say I consent to basically not breaking the network and to trusting humans. Great. So under the hood, it's just created a public-private key pairing. I have this account. If I close this web browser, the account is just lost forever, whatever. If instead I start taking some actions and I start inviting friends, then this account becomes socially recoverable. I can also just download my backup key from here. When a new user arrives, I'm not clear on the mechanism by which I should be dispensing the UBI. Like, I could just throw out money and just make a thing go up, or I could have them come and interact with it. It's not clear to me. I'm kind of building the full stack here. I'm like building the wallet here. This is an interface for the protocol design underneath. And then I'm trying to figure out what the right kind of gamification loop is. And I'm thinking, if a user comes once a day, they collect their allocation of UBI and now it's credited to their account. Was that intuitive enough of a first action? So basically, we're now in the wallet. And so we could receive money, we can look for our address. If we don't know anybody yet, we can send money by choosing how much we want to send and then creating a link to send that. So I've just created a little money link here that's redeemable by anybody. Well, so here I'm going to go and redeem the money link. Now, what's interesting is you can see there's some new consent features here. In addition to respecting human sovereignty and trusting people rather than strangers, we also see that we're accepting the public relationship here between accepting the money and the association with that person, and we're going to also designate that person by default as your guardian, which means they can help you socially recover the account, and your heir, which means after some inactivity, then your assets, this digital account, goes to them. So let's assume the user's okay with that. We join. I'm gonna turn that into a toggle switch later and make that more of like a more granular consent model. So let's say they come in, they collect their UBI too. That's great. And now we have two users here, and we have a reputation among these peers. We have some interaction, and when we go and look at that graph, we can add all kinds of interesting interactions between them that enrich the data model. So like I said, they're a guardian, they're an heir. To some extent, these relationships need to be public such that they're verifiable, and also we are able to maintain a dark forest of privacy, ensuring that users can do all the same actions but with private entities as well. And this is the mechanism by which we can maybe overcome like the wrench attack in crypto, because you cannot know guardians and heirs in all contexts. You can make it anonymous and therefore impossible to design an attack on an individual. So here's the block explorer. There's kind of this concept of a Genesis leaf set, which I'm toying with. I'm thinking, does it make sense for the protocol to mandate some set of interactions to create a new account? Because, identity is social. This is a social protocol. And so I think an account needs a partner. And so actually, if we're going to model things on the graph as relationships, we wait until we have a guardian policy and the heir in place. So that's why those extra checkboxes are there. We're trying to make sure that this account now is socially recoverable as soon as possible. Well, great. So some other considerations. We can do cool things to make sure that, or increase the likelihood, or human identity validation. We can give tools to the user to enable like cryptographic proof of co-presence, which I think is really cool. That is to say, we can say that these two people are not only claiming to know each other in some context, but also we can prove that they were in the same location together, which is some kind of proof of humanity. I mean, especially across some number of different devices. Uh, so, anyway, you could have two different devices do a bit of an ultrasonic ping pong or do a musical ping pong with each other and say you have to share sound back and forth. There's like a challenge and response schema, and the phones do it so quickly with each other that they're able to validate that handshake locally. And the cool thing is, it's not something that it's immune to fraud because those cryptographic signatures, if you tried to do that remotely, then even if you're very intelligent about the way that you transmit it, you just can't get faster than what the speed of sound is able to propagate. Over the network, it introduces, let's say, 50 milliseconds of latency as soon as you get on the network and you're transmitting. So you can make sure that the audio was kind of interchanged within some short physical distance. And so, like on a network that's trying to achieve proof of humanity, I think that, yeah, the relationship and co-presence is something that's cool, but it's not necessarily part of the core protocol. So it's kind of an extension on top of it. So the way to think about that is to say we have some kind of data primitives that are like the core mechanisms. And it's not clear to me kind of to what extent I should be mandating some primitives. Another interesting thing I've been thinking about is the idea that as social creatures, we append data to each other. We can do that in a public way. If we go on Ethereum, we see that people create coins and tag attributes to entities. And so that kind of behavior is unstoppable to some degree. We should just monetize it and enable some kind of data mining. Enable people to post data about other people, kind of like a public profile. And so if you're going to somebody's profile and you see that there are all these comments, then maybe some of them are public access, some of them you have to request access, and then you find out that maybe they're pay gated or something. It's an interesting idea. I think that there's an opportunity for radical social accountability. It's not clear to me kind of how much that's a good thing or a bad thing. I can also expect that there would be some amount of hate speech. I would expect that economically things like hate speech and spam are simply low quality and that their economic ranking should be inferior to information which is useful. And so, let's say you append data about something, you're an author of that data, they request access to the data. You can even, for a stranger, you might even charge some price for them to read what you've written. Or, and to some extent, you can also, we need to think about the incentives for the storage and say, well, somebody's got to host all this data. I've envisioned kind of an archival node system. Like on Ethereum, for example, if you submit a transaction, it can get filtered. If a user tries to send a transaction to a money laundering service, the RPC provider, the company that handles your wallet's connection to the blockchain, basically they have to filter that by legislation. So the way around that is to say, well, you have to become unfilterable. The shape of the data must be indecipherable, and then the strictly monetized participants, those that are the aggregators, the bundlers, the anchors, like they should not be able to intelligently filter transactions. And so same thing with storage. You have to just basically encrypt blobs by default, and that's how everybody has a fine time, and there's just no way to uh, give operators a hard time. Another element to that is to say, well, this leaf set that I've created, one of the leaves is the network witness leaf, and I call that the chaff leaf. And basically, the idea is it's kind of a random encrypted blob of data, and the client deletes the key of it afterwards. So, the interesting thing is when you submit that leaf, there is plausible deniability. You know, the protocol mandates that you submit this leaf in your first bundle of data to have a valid account. So by default, there is um, kind of protection built in, and it is something that can be regularly mandated, such that, you know, let's say in an extreme example, an authoritarian government comes into your home and they say, you know, I saw that you published an encrypted data bundle. You know, we're going to have to force you to give us the keys to that. You can say, oh, well, no, that actually, I did not do anything that was wrong. That was just the network protocol that was requiring one of the network witness chaff leafs. And there would be no way to know the difference. And so that's the really nice thing. So it's just like a privacy protection feature by default. And that's part of, again, that Genesis leaf set, why I think it makes sense to kind of like bundle up this collection of transactions as your first instantiation into the network. It's kind of a new and interesting thing, and it requires cooperation to some extent. One current problem I'm thinking about here is that I've allocated too much UBI on the front end. So if you go and you create a new account, then extend the account credit, then it's generating positive sum value, and it should not be doing that. So it actually needs to cost a little bit coming in. Speaking of cost, you know, there's more than one way to pay for things. And one interesting way is to say we could do some kind of work. We could do a proof of work implementation to achieve something. We can say, you know, we could do something for the network, like make sure that some hosted data is available, or validate, like reconstruct partial state. Whatever. We can do whatever we want. Oh, what else have I been thinking about? Oh, yeah. So there's this idea in economics. So inflation has two components. One is the inflation rate is money velocity and money supply. The money supply is just number of units in the economy. If I print more money, then the money supply goes up. The money velocity is the speed at which money changes hands. And so when the money velocity goes up and the money supply goes up, those are the components of inflation. And so the interesting opportunity is to say, well, inflation incentivizes participants to spend money because your money's melting at all times, right? In addition to your money melting at all times, well, you know, it's a knob, that's a dial that you can turn to increasingly or decreasingly incentivize people to hold their wealth versus dispense their wealth. It makes sense to me intuitively that the economy which has the highest money velocity is the healthier of any two in a comparison. I'm not sure that that's true. Maybe it could cause undue stress on the system. Well, I'm just not sure about that. What I do know is that a strictly deflationary system is not sufficient because there is no mechanism by which the wealth gets redistributed. And so wealth concentrates to the highest value providers. And that's kind of the default outcome of capitalist systems is, you know, wealth hoarding. It's not such a bad thing, but you do need some mechanism to redistribute. And so, you know, one way to do that is to say, if we can achieve a one-to-one human account, we can just create money, insert it into that new account, and then by default that flattens the wealth curve, because if every dollar is taxed equally, then the people with the most dollars have the highest percentage tax on the new money that's minted. So you print money right into the pockets of each one-to-one human. Now again, that's so. Let's say you do that at a rate you're like minting 3%, and then you put that into every citizen's pocket. Mm. Yeah, so that's one level of like money melting incentivization. The other is to say, okay, so now you know it's happening passively. Your money's being reduced in value at some slow rate. Well, 3% ain't that bad compared to the US dollar and other assets. So, and then you can go on to the next level and say, okay, and in addition, depending on your particular money velocity, we're going to milt away your money. Like your credits were literally disappearing if you don't spend them. And well, I don't know. That's a messed up way to think about it. Instead of decreasing, let's make it a positive kind of incentive, and we'll say because what we're trying to do is we're incentivizing you to engage with new and diverse network participants. So we should have a positive sum offering to say if you're interested in exploring and sending credits to new transactional partners, then that gives us a lot of information. It gives you new opportunities to uh, increase your economic um, efficiency, and that's good for the protocol diagnostics. Well, yeah, you can measure the diversity of the clusters that a user is sending credits to. So you can look at the K value and say, uh, depending on like the previous X epochs worth of transaction history, you can apply some kind of multiplier to the network and or to the UBI uh, dividend, yeah, to that participant, or maybe to those participants. Hmm. Yeah, and then one other thing I was thinking about is this idea of kind of tagging. So basically, everybody is an entity in this system, and we have the idea that we can go on their page and kind of write some data. Who's going to host that data? Not clear to me. Uh, how much should they pay for it? Probably going to be a free market. Storage contracts are really tricky because uh, you can't guarantee that you're going to host something. You can only guarantee that you have the intent to host something. You can include reputation into that to some degree. But I think one of the biggest failures of protocols like Arweave is they claim up front that they're going to imprint value. I mean, we could also just let users imprint value directly onto Bitcoin about a user. It's really expensive, though. I mean, maybe people are willing to pay $5, $10 for an OP return. Yeah, that's probably reasonable. And then I was thinking there should be an economic backing. So, like, if you see one kind of, let's say, comment about a user, like, oh, yeah, that person is helpful or whatever, then you can burn energy in some form. You can pay money or proof of work, BUBI or Bitcoin, to inscribe further and increase the data permanence and the data availability. Well, another consideration there is to say if you have some kind of hierarchical structure where there's like a parent-child relationship with the comment chain, there's maybe like a topic and then there's a comment, then if you are to inscribe the data permanence of the lowest child, then you also need to make sure that the value flows up that chain, which is a bit bizarre. And the implication of that is to say you could be kind of supporting things. I don't know. It's interesting to some degree to wonder like in what kind of contrived situations you could be accidentally like economically supporting maybe viewpoints that you don't agree with, but like by necessity it makes sense that you can't delete or like should not be able to delete one chain from a long chain of counterplay. But maybe there should be no chain at all. Maybe it should just stop at the first link. In any case, that's what I'm chewing on.